Greetings, my excellent friend.
Welcome to Heavy Metal
History.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's episode of the Heavy Metal History Podcast. We are coming back to you. As usual, I'm your host, Dustin, and with me, as always, is Matt, all the way in Australia.
Yeah, g'day, everyone. Yeah, g'day.
So I know we told you guys last week what's going on with everything, and this week we're getting back to it. We're going back to the history. You know, we need to get back to our original idea and what we were doing in the beginning. So we're going to pick up a little bit where we left off. We did skip a month of June from 87. We're just going to go to July. And that's because there's a lot of good shit that came out in July of 1987.
Exactly. And when we get into this, I think like you will have an issue with one of these albums and I'll have an issue with another. But it should be a fun episode and I can't wait to get into it.
You know, as much as an issue as I have with that specific album, you know, just all the shit that was going on behind the scenes is still interesting to me, so I can kind of get into it that way, which is nice. So the three albums that we're going to talk about this episode, we're gonna talk about Napalm Death, Scum. We're going to talk about Dio's Dream Evil, and finally we're going to end on Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction.
Oh yes.
I know we've kind of hinted at my distaste for Guns N' Roses, and that's fine. But I think it'll be fun to talk about. I think there's like a ton of interesting shit about that whole record and the band. So I think the first one that we're going to start off with today, we're going to start off with Napalm Death, Scum.
Nice. Yeah, I think this is an album that we both can universally agree with. Is a great album.
Yeah, it's good for. It's not the best Napalm Death album by far. It's probably like the weakest in their whole discography. But it's so instrumental in starting what we now know as grindcore. I mean,
exactly.
Grindcore is known for being really fast, short songs, and before Napalm Death, nobody was really doing that.
Yeah, what's that meme? It's like you arrive like 5 minutes late to a grindcore concert and you miss like the first 7 songs.
Pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. So with Scum, there were 28 songs that were recorded about 9 months apart by basically 2 different lineups. One of the guys that we talked about in a past episode, Justin Broderick, was on one side of this record. He was the guitar player, and you know, this album's like a very landmark release in metal in general. And I don't think a lot of the world was maybe ready for this record, to be fair, because it was pretty insane for its time. I mean, the most kind of fast, brutal kind of thing anybody ever even heard at that point was Slayer's Reign of Blood. And I mean, 10 songs, 28 minutes, Slayer, that's a pretty fast album, but you know, there was still more song structure to that album. You know, it had verses, chorus, and guitar solos, whereas like, you know, Scum had 28 tracks that were, you know, it was like 33 minutes long.
Yeah. I believe one of the songs in there too, just to like as a testament, just how short this album is, actually has like the Guinness Book of like World Records, like for the shortest song in the world, "You Suffer."
Yep, and the lyrics for the entire song are "You suffer, but why?" That's it.
Yeah.
I think there was a point in time where Cattle Decapitation was trying to beat that record. I know one of their albums or early albums has like a really quick 1-2 second song like that, but yeah, grindcore is really interesting because it's all about speed and just like getting the fastest song just possible. I mean, if you look at bands nowadays like Pig Destroyer or gosh, who else? I stopped listening to grindcore a lot, so I don't really keep up with it.
Yeah, same. Like even like Anal Cunt as well.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, and there's some diversity between those bands, but not a lot. Like I feel like you could listen to any of those bands, maybe besides Pig Destroyer, who have like a very that's Pig Destroyer sound, or like even I guess Napalm Death, like current Napalm Death, like you're gonna hear Barney's vocals over everything.
Yeah.
But back in the day, man, grindcore was just like all about getting it out fast and hard, and you couldn't really tell the difference.
Exactly. There's that very kind of like crusty, kind of like lo-fi sound to it that you can really hear when you listen to Scum as well. They've really tried, like even like grindcore now, it still tries to sound like this record. Mm-hmm. To a certain degree.
No, you're absolutely right. So Matt, how much do you think they recorded this album for? Even though we already know the answer.
See, like back, you would have to say about a couple of $1,000. Like this would have been, to actually rent, it was equipment, actually to rent studio time, actually to hire a producer and all that, and go from there with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, they recorded it for £50 at Rich Bitch Studio in August of 1986.
Okay.
$50. That is insane.
Right.
Well, I guess in pounds, that'd be a little bit more than American dollars, but man,
probably back then would have rounded out to about say like $75.
Yeah, and
US.
that's probably like one paycheck for those guys back then too.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this album, despite its, I guess, low production value, serves the purpose for like the kind of music they're trying to play. In the early days, there wasn't a lot of need, I guess, to make the record sound good, because it's such a kind of visceral sounding genre. Like, why make it sound pristine?
Exactly. But the thing about this record is like, you can still basically hear like instruments, like each individual instrument like going on. It isn't just like a big ball of like, staticky noise as we're making it out to be.
Yeah, that's true. I do think that the drums drown out everything else, like just a little bit, like not a whole lot, but the drums are definitely like the driving force of this record by far.
I mean, exactly, and yeah, you can really just tell that like the drums kind of overpower the vocals, because the vocals kind of really just take a back seat in this record, I do feel.
Yeah, they hadn't found like their main vocalist yet, and probably due to like all the changing members and stuff like that. We talked about it, the fact that this was supposed to be a split record, basically. So side A of Scum is like a completely different band minus the drummer. So if you look at like, if you figure out where it splits up, cause we don't have a record player anymore, or we do, but if you look at where the record gets split and listen to it, I don't know if you can really differentiate like the two bands, like it's
where it stops. Like I was listening to this earlier today, and I really couldn't tell where it stopped. Like I know there was a change, but I couldn't really figure out where that change was. And I really do feel that really just it is like it just serves. It's a real success best just how like even though this record is chaotic, it's very kind of cohesive.
Yeah, exactly, and it's very surprising because as much of a big deal as people like make like the member changes, like it's not really that noticeable. So for side A, but it's the drummer who's the only constant, which is Mick Harris. So on side A, it's Nick Bullen on bass and vocals, and then Justin Broderick on guitar. So like we were talking about back when Mike was on and talking about Godflesh and everything. I mean, this guy like kind of invented two different genres. He was in a grindcore band, then he went and did like that industrial metal synth stuff with Godflesh, and the guy's legendary as far as I'm concerned in the music industry.
Yeah. And, but side B.
Yes, side B. We got Lee Dorian on vocals, motherfucking Bill Steer on guitar from Carcass. Everybody should know that. And
I don't know that self. I don't know what to say, mate.
Yeah, and Jim Whitley on bass. It blows my mind that Bill Steer was also very instrumental in this band, because if you look at Carcass's first couple albums, it was straight up grindcore as well. Not as short songs, definitely a lot longer song like times and structures and everything, but that's the kind of band that Bill Steer wanted to be in until he took Carcass in that like really melodic influence that they ended up becoming known for.
Yeah, because it was funny because they would have recorded this, then it would have been that fucking album that had like Burnt Your Crisp on it. Then it would have been what's that one? Necro. Oh fuck! I need to Google it. I know exactly what it is. The one that has Incarnated Solvent Abuse, and then Heartwork.
Yeah, Necroticism. There was two.
Necroticism, yeah.
There were 2 records before Necroticism. They're both grindcore. One was like Recaputrefaction, and I forget what the other one was, but they're definitely like really lo-fi, grindy kind of stuff. And then like Necroticism was like the start of the melodic stuff, and then Heartwork was just like full blown melodic. But
like death metal, like you can really tell like what came out like 91.
Yeah, somewhere around there. But we digress. Obviously, we're going to talk about Carcass eventually, but it's cool seeing where like Bill Steer started and him being so instrumental and like kind of getting this band off the ground somewhat. You know, if like what if Bill Steer wasn't on that second side? Would he have gone and done Carcass? Would he have stayed in Napalm Death? Who knows? It's fucking cool. You know, we talk about the history of it, and it's neat kind of seeing where that started.
Of course, man. Yeah.
So, I mean, besides that, man, a lot of this record, it just, you think, 33 minutes, but it goes by so fast, so you don't even, you don't even realize 33 minutes has gone by, and you're like, oh, that's it?
Yeah, like I remember listening to it today, and like I was listening to this album, and then because I had it on Spotify, and then afterwards it came on with the latest album they put out, Apex Predator, and like, not to kind of detract from this, but I kind of really couldn't tell the difference between like, the two of them. It kind of just all melded into one, and it really just goes to show, like, almost like 30 years later.
Yeah, I'd say the only difference you could really notice is the vocals. Barney's got a really,
It really just overpowers everything.
Yeah, he's got a monstrous fucking voice, man. He's one of my favorite vocalists to hear.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much it for this record. I will say, for 30 years, I don't know if the record necessarily holds up. Like, it's not bad. I definitely don't think it's the best one in their discography. Like, I've definitely put Scum pretty low, but also, like, you have to hold it in high regard because of what it started. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I mean, it's what it basically represents as opposed to what it is.
Yeah. And, I think taking that into account, I understand its legendary status and why it needs to be recognized in the pantheon of like grindcore and metal itself and just the band's overall history. So with that being said, before we go on to the next record, we're going to play a bit of a interview with Mick Harris. This interview was taken from like an extra DVD clip, so I thought it'd be cool to kind of let you guys hear about it. And he talks about recording some of Scum and everything like that. So we're gonna play that, and we'll be right back.
So Justin left October of '86. Nick left March of '87. Lee joined. Bill joined. And Jimmy Whiteley joined, which that became the B-side of Scum, which we recorded in April of 1987. Richbridge Studios, Ali, where we recorded the A and the B-side of Scum, first Napalm Death album. The lineup for the B-side, as you know, it was splintered. We had Bill Steer in Liverpool, the Wirral. We had Lee in Coventry. And the two nearest from Kings Norton would have been me and Jim. So even though we all knew each other and it all worked well, we only got together to record the B-side. We got together for one rehearsal, which was the evening prior to going into the studio. All of Napalm's rehearsals came from probably the gigging. That's how it got tight.
They rehearsed at the Mermaid?
Yes, to be honest. I went to Bill's in Liverpool, the Wirral. Bill had only just left school, was about to start university, and his parents were a little bit reluctant to Bill coming to Birmingham by himself, and he said, well, Mick, yes, I'd love to join Napalm, but could you come to Liverpool to rehearse? My parents don't want me coming to coming to Birmingham. So I said, that's not a problem. So I trundled down to Liverpool with my little book of songs that I'd written. Bill living in quite a big house, got his own floor in this house with his own rehearsal room, because he'd already got Carcass. So he'd got the drums in there, bass amp, guitar amp. So just me and Bill jammed for 2 separate days to get these songs as tight as we possibly could. Still own the tape recording from those sessions. Bill was just a natural. He was tight. I loved his tone. As I say, it was a dirtier tone because of the down tuning. It just worked. It was perfect. He had it down. He then came to Birmingham to have this one rehearsal, probably about 2 weeks later, after me and him meeting up and jamming at his place, he came and the 4 of us got together. And even Lee didn't practice the lyrics on the eve of the recording, because it was still being worked. Well, where do I put the lyrics? Lee was cued in on the B-side of Scum.
All right. So hopefully you guys dug that little interview there, and we're gonna move on to Dio's Dream Evil. Now we actually have not talked about any other Dio records yet.
No, it's really kind of quite striking, because the first 2 records, Holy Diver and Last in Line, are just absolutely one of my favorites.
Yeah, and it's only because we skipped a bunch of years to get to 1987, but we are definitely planning on going back to those records. We have to talk about, and we are going to talk a little bit about some stuff that happened between Sacred Heart and this record, so there's going to be some bleed through there. So this was the 4th record for Dio by this point in time. He had already done the Black Sabbath stuff. So Heaven and Hell would have came out. Mob Rules would have come out. Warner, I believe, offered him the solo kind of recording contract in between Mob Rules and Heaven and Hell, which he used to record Holy Diver and then Last in Line, and just kept going forward. And then I think he left Sabbath after Mob Rules, and then just went and continued on this. Yeah, and I think that pretty much anything Dio does, maybe minus some of the early stuff, like Elf is a little out there for me personally, but all his metal stuff is very solid. I think anytime you just hear Ronnie's vocals, it's like, fuck yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, it's like the man's like 4 foot nothing, but he's got the voice of a goddamn lion.
Yeah. So this album came out on July 21st, 1987. The same day as our next record that we're going to talk about when we get to that. But that's some serious competition when we already know what we're going to talk about, is Appetite for Destruction. So think about that for a second. Both of these albums got released on the same day. Which one are you going to buy?
If I had a choice going back in time, I probably would have bought this one.
Really? Okay. Cool.
I would have bought this one, but I wouldn't have been particularly happy with it.
Yeah. Okay, so Dream Evil, it got released in the summer of 87, and, there's definitely some sentimental attraction to it, even though, popularity-wise, the album didn't do so well. A lot of fans began to lose interest because Vivian Campbell left the band. They had, a falling out with, the making of Sacred Heart. I guess a lot of just stuff wasn't really clicking with the band. So, and this is the mid 80s, and a lot of stuff was teetering on the brink of hair metal and Guitar Hero worship, all those Jason Beckers and Marty Friedmans and those kind of guys. So in a sense, Dio did kind of take the world by surprise with this album,
Yeah, and it's but I mean, it's you've got a different guitarist, but you've still got Jimmy Bain on bass. You still have Vinny Appice on drums, who also drummed on that Mob Rules Black Sabbath record. So so the rest of the lineup is pretty much there. It's just that they just changed guitarists, and I mean, it could have been an absolute really big gamble for them.
Yeah, and I think that Dio's a smart guy. He did his homework with who he was going to get back in the band to kind of take Campbell's place. And, you know, even then, like, the album is still kind of following like a basic blueprint, you know? It still sounds like Dio, but he was just a little more focused on providing like a little bit more of a melodic vibe rather than like trying to make more aggressive stuff. Because if you listen to some of these songs, and I will say like the title track in particular, like Dream Evil, the riffs are like, they're still pretty harsh and like pretty heavy, you know?
Oh, well, of course, like, but it's got that more kind of like more. It's really kind of more slowed down. It's more kind of grandiose. It's more a little bit more epic. They tried to go with this.
Yeah, it's catchy. It's a little bit more melodic. It's got like that I guess wizards and
warlocks and elves.
Vibe. Yeah. But you know, not all the songs on this album are great. There's definitely some that, you know, I would
that really just fall flat. There's none that are really. There's like a lot of them really just aren't kind of, you know, memorable. None of them, like, not none of them, but like, I feel like a lot of them are just kind of like there, and then once you've heard them, like, it's just time to kind of move on. Nothing really kind of really sticks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's definitely some filler songs.
Oh, like, and that's really a shame too.
Yeah, and you know, I guess I don't know how bad like the falling out was, or if like maybe he just wasn't like creatively influenced right now, or like they were just trying to do the best they could to make an album. Despite that, I think they did as good of a job as they possibly could, having to follow up those first 3 records, if you think about it that way.
Oh, of course. Yeah, that's I really feel like they did the best with what they had.
Yeah. And it wasn't like they weren't trying. You can tell they were trying really hard. It's just, you know, it's really hard to recover from like a falling out and then continuing on like with a different guitar player. But I mean, you know, so despite the fact that like Campbell, you know, leaving the band was like kind of a punch in the face for the project, you know, when Dio hired Craig Goldie, he had a very similar guitar playing style, even though like Campbell was like a little more fluent, I guess. But you know, Goldie was like really efficient, and he could play solos no problem, and he had some pretty good riffs, man. I mean, you know, it's a little different. You know, not every guitar player is going to sound exactly like the last guitar player, but you know, it's
exactly, and not everyone's going to bail, you know, an album out like J.K. Lee did when due to Randy Rhoads passing for that Aussie record.
Yeah, that's true.
But I mean, this is fine. Like, when we talk about does this album hold up, I'm going to say no. But did this album would have held up then? And I'm going to probably say no as well. I really didn't. Not to say I didn't like this album, but like it was just kind of nothing.
I don't really mind this album. You know, obviously, like, there are better Dio albums, but I can put this one on and still listen to it just fine. You know, like, I'll maybe skip like 1 or 2 songs. But I don't think it's bad. But I agree, I don't think it necessarily holds up either. If you were to put this on today,
this album also did inspire that band Dream Evil, and I do not like the band Dream Evil.
Oh wow, yeah, I was having problems with that doing research, like trying to find out like stuff about this album. I just have shit coming up about this band Dream Evil, and I'm like, I don't care.
This like stupid like power metal band.
Oh yeah, I'm not a big power metal guy. But, so during kind of interviews for Dream Evil, Dio talked about Sacred Heart and how much of an unhappy album it was to make because of like all the friction with Campbell, and he knew there was a couple tracks on Sacred Heart that he referred to as album helper songs, and that's kind of his euphemism for filler, which is weird because I feel like there's more filler songs on Dream Evil than there ever was on Sacred Heart. I think Sacred Heart has like a ton of pretty, like, really solid songs.
Yeah, it's like it's weird because like you go back through the discography and it's like Holy Diver, that's just bangers, just like through and through. And Dream Evil, like Last in Line, there's a couple of songs that hit and miss. But then it comes to like this one, and I feel like, as apart from say like Night People and like Dream Evil, the rest is, and like I Could Have Been a Dreamer. This is just kind of just, you could have really just served well as an EP, and you could have just gone from there with it.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, it's. I guess their discography like is all over the place, you know, like in terms of sales and the changing climate of metal in general, you know. But irregardless of that, like Dio still kept with it. I mean, he was making records for years after this, so this didn't stop him, you know.
Yeah, it's I mean, we look at the charts, and I mean, like, this album did really, really well in Europe. Like, I think it got to number 4 in Sweden, but then it was like the highest it ever charted in the States. It was at like number 43.
Yeah, it's like that country and like Europeans like picked up on this album, they loved it, whereas like in the US, you know, everything was changing. It was all becoming like hair metal and thrash metal.
Like this is the kind of almost the end of the old garden, when with the next album, even though they came out exactly the same day,
yeah,
it's the end of an era and the start of another one on the same day. Like how crazy is that?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong, man. I mean, regardless of that, you know, Dio's vocals are still epic no matter what, and you know,
no one can hold a torch to him.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a very unfortunate kind of record for their discography and like the time it came out. I think maybe if it would have came out, I mean, not that they could have put it out sooner, you know, because they were pretty consistent with putting out like a record every year, every, you know, year and a half.
Every 2-3 years, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, it is what it is, and it is unfortunate that, you know, they couldn't have Campbell in the band, but even then, would his input have made this record different? I don't really know. I don't think it would have, you know?
Yeah, I don't think so either. It's
hell, it could have ended up worse.
Like this is, I mean, to use kind of a pun, I really do feel like this is kind of like the last in line for like Dio music.
No, there's some later Dio stuff that's pretty solid.
Oh, of course. I mean, that Heaven and Hell album, that's fucking just heavy as shit.
Yeah. So, yeah, before we move on to the last album we're going to talk about, I have another interview with Dio talking about kind of this record and all like the weird falling out stuff that happened with Campbell. So we're going to play that for you right now, and then we're going to move on to the last record.
Maybe. Well, I agree in varying forms, I think. I was not disappointed with some of the material on the album. With the song Sacred Heart itself, I thought was the continuation of what this band tries to do at different points in its on its LPs, and that is the classical, big kind of thing, things that I've been involved with from Rainbow Days through Sabbath right till now. I wasn't disappointed in that at all. And Rock and Roll Children, I've always said, is, if not my favorite song, one of my favorites that I've ever written or ever had anything to do with. But there were some products and some pieces on the album that were not good enough to be all the building blocks that you need to make that product stand. We and I don't write singles, we write an album, and an album needs all those pieces to make it come alive. A lot of the material on that LP, unfortunately, was, as I've referred to before, album helper. Just there to fill up some space, because we were very unhappy during the making of that album. Vivian was not very productive at the time, has now since gone on to something I hope is more productive for him.
This is Vivian Campbell, your former guitarist?
Yes, right.
Whitesnake.
He's playing with Whitesnake now. And again, there's no hard feelings, at least not by me. I don't know what his feelings are, and I really don't care. When you're unhappy with that, in that situation, you make an unhappy product. You make an unhappy album, and everyone is disappointed in what you do. I think sometimes you also get to a point where you're constantly trying to outdo your own formula, and that becomes very difficult. This album was a return to form because we wanted it to be that way. Holy Diver was an album, the first of our albums, was an album that had nothing to prove. We didn't have anyone to please, only music to make from our hearts and from our minds. And this one, I wanted to be the same way. So we went back and tried to be a bit more diverse again, to make every song different, to make it more like a book with 9 chapters that really doesn't reach much of a conclusion, and the only conclusion being that we were pleased to do it. And so if there was disappointment in the Sacred Heart album, I think this, or hopefully this will wash away the disappointment.
Your new guitarist, Craig Goldie. And not only that, but I understand Craig co-wrote most of the new material with you for the new record.
Yeah.
The partnership seems to be taking off very quickly.
Well, it wasn't that difficult because I've known Craig since he was 17 when he was in the band Rough Cut, where some of us have taken some other good players. Ozzy got Jakey Lee from that band. We've gotten Craig now and Claude Schnell, our keyboard player, who's also from Rough Cut, and now Paul Shotino, who's the singer in that band, is now playing with Quiet Riot. So it has been a place where we've kind of run to snatch people here and there. But that aside, having known him that long, it's been very easy for me to get along with him because I knew his attitude right away, and I knew that he was brought up with Deep Purple and Rainbow, which were something I'd had something to do with both of those people, so I knew he was coming from some good stock, I think.
Right, I wanted to ask you, in fact, because a lot has already been made of Craig's quite detectable Ritchie Blackmore influence, if you like, the guitarist who partnered in Rainbow. Would it be fair to say, in some respects, you've retraced some of the best elements of your earlier work with Rainbow in order to progress with the new Dio album?
Well, I don't know. I think that the constant mention of Rainbow all the time, I think, first of all, points out that everyone liked that band an awful lot. So did I. It was very unique and very special, and in a special time in music, I think, just as Sabbath was for me. It was, I think, well, it, of course, to me, was always the first heavy metal band, and then again, I think it was the first band yet again to resurrect the attention to heavy metal. In 1978, the Heaven and Hell album, I think, in great part, did exactly that. So I'm very, very pleased to have taken part in both those situations. As far as Craig's interest in it, or a reflection of Rainbow within this album, Dream Evil, I think all it is, if you listen to all the albums that I've been involved with from Rainbow onward, I think you'll find that it was perhaps more my uniqueness that made all that happen. After all, I don't hear anyone saying that Purple sound like Rainbow, and he was in that band too, wasn't he? Or that Rainbow sounded like Rainbow, and he was in that one as well. I think it's just a matter of the character that you have as a writer, as a performer, and I think my character has just stayed constant because I'm not one to let people tell me what to do normally. Of course, Ritchie had as much to do with Rainbow as I did, but I think that the voice is something that you listen to an awful lot. It's a real point of interest right away. So I think that made a great difference. I seem to be babbling about this, don't I? But the whole point was, I really don't think that that Craig is that Ritchie Blackmore clone. I think that perhaps in some ways that may anger him a little bit. It doesn't me. I just think that he again listened to good people as he grew up. He's got a lot of the elements of all the best players, but he is Craig Goldie, and I think it's his chance to prove now and let people follow in his lead for a change.
All right, guys. Hopefully you dug that interview as well. I kind of like surf these things on YouTube to find like little interesting tidbits to add to this stuff. So, as much information as we can relay, sometimes hearing these old interviews, it's really interesting to kind of get, from the horse's mouth, so to speak, like what was going on, since we cannot have Dio on the podcast, unfortunately.
Speaking of that, just before we get into the last two, did you hear what happened with Gene Simmons?
Yeah, him trying to like trademark the horns or some bullshit like that.
Yeah. So what happened was like all throughout the 70s, you know how Kiss is just like merchandise.
Yeah.
They were trying to do that, but Dio claims that he was the one that kind of did it, and was basically the old devil horns and stuff, like old Italian superstition.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only thing like stopping him from like filing the injunction to trademark it. But since he passed, now that Gene Simmons, that absolute kind of scumbag, has been like, well, he's dead now. There's nothing stopping me from doing this.
What a fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
He's the whole reason too that like King Diamond had to change his face paint up at one point in time, because
what?
Yeah, he was like trying to like get a copyright or like sue him for having like similar face painting stuff, and like
Well, what the fuck is he gonna like sue the rest of like Scandinavian, European, like the whole entire black metal scene?
Yeah, his line of thinking with that stuff, he's trying to ape on being like metal so hard, and he just like wants to own it, which is really fucking weird. Even though, I mean,
the only person in that band that can ever claim a right to like, you can't paint your face like I do, is fucking Peter Criss.
Yeah, nobody wants to paint their face as a cat.
I don't know. Like, I've always wanted to see one of those like black metal bands just have that.
You know, some of them get close sometimes. If you really look at some of their face paint, like they if they do it wrong, it's on the verge of like mouse whiskers or animal facial features sometimes.
Exactly, and that's so hilarious.
But yeah, you know,
they're trying to look all serious, and this is like a little cat.
I guess the bottom line is fuck Gene Simmons.
Yeah, seriously, fuck Gene Simmons.
I'll listen to some Kiss songs, but you know, fuck Gene Simmons. Man, don't sue us, Gene Simmons.
Yeah, please, no bully, please, no bully.
All right, Matt. So you know what time it is.
I know exactly what time it is.
The most divisive record we're going to talk about. Before we talk about this record, I'm just going to say right now, I'm not a fan of Guns N' Roses. I fucking hate them. I think Axl Rose's voice is fucking a cat being slammed against a chalkboard while having nails shot into it. Like, it's fucking... I fucking hate his vocals. I think Slash is like a really boring guitar player. His solos aren't that good. I just do not like Guns N' Roses. I'm sorry, people.
Here's the thing with Guns N' Roses. Here's the thing. I don't like Guns N' Roses.
Okay.
I also feel like almost the exact same way, but a little less kind of like... I don't want to use, you know, like the whole euphemism of a cat getting slammed against the wall to describe Axl Rose's voice. However, I do like this album and this album alone. If you make me go listen to anything else by Guns N' Roses, like November Rain, can't stand that shit, we'll just walk away.
Yeah.
But there's something, and I don't know whether it's, you know, based in kind of nostalgia. I remember listening to this album when I was like a really kind of little kid. But I do like this album.
And like I said, it's just my personal opinion on the band. I get that. I understand why people like Guns N' Roses, and that's fine. I'm not going to shit on anybody else for liking them. And to be fair, like, they are prolific for a reason. This band is, you know, they're like up there with Motley Crue and all of like the crazy fucked up shit that happened and what they were, you know, like kind of doing in the LA scene. Like, there's a reason. So I get that part of it, and it's cool to know about all that stuff. But as far as their music goes, it's not for me. I'm just not a fan. I'm not ever going to be a fan. And that's fine.
Yeah. We will ban you, however, if you do like Chinese democracy, and we will ban you, and I will personally come and fight you if you think that Axl Rose is a good fit for AC/DC Live.
Oh, God, no, that's terrible. Oh, speaking of which, Matt, when I went to go see Fireworks the other night for America, they played AC/DC's Thunderstruck to get the fireworks going. Don't know how that makes sense for America,
that's such
but
an American song, bro. I'm surprised if they didn't play that.
All right, man. So let's get into this. Let's talk about Appetite for Destruction. There's like a fuck ton of stuff to talk about. So as everybody knows, this is their debut record. Came out the same day as Dio's Dream Evil, July 21st, 1987, by Geffen Records, to massive, massive commercial success. It topped the Billboard 200 and became the best-selling debut album, as well as the 11th best-selling album in the United States, with 30 million copies sold worldwide. Holy fuck.
Fucking hell, and I have one of them. I
can safely say I never had one. But I mean, 30,000 or 30 million, that's not that many in the grand scheme of things, considering there's 7 billion people on the planet. But
that's pretty much like everyone here plus 5 more million people having it.
Yeah, it's a lot of people for sure. I mean, no matter what you think about this album, it does always get put in like retrospective lists as one of the greatest albums of all time. Even though when it first came out, critics are pretty kind of ambivalent to it. They didn't really care one way or the other, you know. But a lot of these songs on the record, they were written while the band was just like kind of doing the club circuit in LA. So a number of songs that would be like featured on later Guns N' Roses albums that were considered for Appetite for Destruction were like Back Off Bitch, You Could Be Mine, your favorite song November Rain, and Don't Cry. So, and I mean, hey, to be fair, the only reason November Rain didn't get put on this album is because they already agreed to put Sweet Child of Mine on it. So,
oh God, again.
Yeah, they were like, oh, well, I already have a ballad, so no reason to put 2 on there.
Yeah, and I really do feel like that if they did put November Rain on there, it would have like really kind of detracted from what this kind of like high energy record's about.
Mm-hmm. You know, there was a point in time where I think I think one of the reasons maybe I dislike them so much is there was a point in time where I heard Paradise City so many fucking times that I was just like annoyed anytime I heard it.
Yeah.
And I just got sick of it. And even like Welcome to the Jungle, man, like how often do you hear that fucking song?
Yeah, it's like the main kind of like rock station we have here in Sydney. It's like they'll play at least one song off this album like every couple of hours.
Yeah, it gets really overplayed, and I think that's.
But it's not like they won't play like kind of the deep cuts like It's So Easy or anything like that. It'll always be either like Sweet Child of Mine, Welcome to the Jungle, or like Paradise City.
Yep, exactly. So I guess kind of after a couple weeks of rehearsal, the band went to Daryl Dragon's Rumbo Recorders in January of 1987. So they spent about 2 weeks there recording just basic tracks. And what's Clink? This guy Clink, I guess his name.
Was probably the producer.
Yeah, he was splicing together the best takes with like a razor blade. So he worked like 18-hour days for a whole fucking month while Slash was like overdubbing in the afternoon and the evenings. And then you had Axl performing vocals, on top of that. And, Slash, I guess, apparently struggled to find a guitar sound before coming up with a Gibson Les Paul. And he plugged it into a Marshall, which today that sounds pretty, I was just like, cliche, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but
I feel like it's cliche because of this.
Yeah, it's very common nowadays just to have a Marshall and a Les Paul. Like, it's not special anymore. But he did spend hours with Clink paring down and structuring the solos, so they did put a lot of work into it, as far as like how to make the song sound, which is good.
And they also put a lot of money into this as well.
Yeah, and this is what blows my mind. So earlier we were talking about, this is like the craziest thing too when you see like these massive like divides in record, like paying for record studios. We talked about Napalm Death recording one side of Scum for £50. Guns N' Roses spent $370,000 on this record.
And how much of that would have been spent on coke?
Actually heroin for them.
Oosh.
Yeah.
Just getting right to it.
Yeah, they were all on heroin, minus Axl, but $370,000, man. Like, this record doesn't, like, what did they pay for? I don't know. That's what when I see numbers like that, I'm like, what did they pay for to make it sound like $370,000? Sure, we can joke about them spending money on drugs like Black Sabbath did, and that's probably some of the case, for sure.
Yeah, but it also probably would have been with like with marketing, probably with all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That would have got into actual promotion as well. Because this was like a debut album, but that had like it was one of the highest selling of like all time.
Yeah, it's for a debut.
Marketed the shit out of that.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good point. If that's part of like the actual marketing budget, I guess that makes sense. But I just don't know, man. I wasn't around. I was only like a few months old back then.
So I didn't know shit.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, like,
see shit.
Were there billboards? Was it like TV commercials? How did they get the word out? That's what I would like to know. Anyways, that's a big number. But according to the drummer, Steven Adler, all the drums were done in just like 6 days, which is really quick. And it's, I'm sure if he really wanted to, he could probably do them in like 2 days. But I think the main thing was...
exactly. But what took them so long was Axl Rose. It took much longer to get his vocals done. He insisted on doing them in one line at a time.
Yeah.
Just being absolutely perfectionist, and it really kind of just drove the rest of the band away from the studio when he was working, which is quite a surprise because if you look at Axl Rose now, or even back like a couple of years ago, and you look at his behavior, it was like, yeah, I'm just going to show up like 2-3 hours late to a concert. It's fine.
Yeah, and honestly, that was kind of the case with some of this record too. There were points where, he wouldn't show up. But we'll get to that in a little bit. But many of the songs on this record, they were all solo tracks that the individual members like already wrote separate from the band. So, you had It's So Easy that Duff McKagan wrote. You have Think About You that Izzy Stradlin wrote. You have Rocket Queen that was like a kind of unfinished / McKagan Adler song that was taken from their earlier band called Road Crew, which that could be a confusing band name. But, most of the songs kind of reflect the band's personal experiences, I mean, as with anything, you're going to write from what you know. We talked about Welcome to the Jungle, and a lot of the lyrics in that Axl wrote, there's varying kind of, I guess, stories. One is he said that he wrote because he would look out at LA and just be like, man, it's like a jungle. You can get anything you want here. Like, there's just so much shit going on. And then another is that he encountered a man in New York shortly at... Oh, wait. I fucked up, guys. I'm reading about the wrong song.
Yeah, so yeah, you can basically just tell Welcome to Jungle is like, about basically just about small town boy going into like big city.
Yeah.
And another one you can tell Mr. Brownstone, which is basically about heroin.
Yep. Yeah. It's kind of like their version of Snowblind, the not so subtle kind of lyrics about heroin, pretty much. And I guess a lot of those bands back in the day, you kind of, if that's what you're doing, you're taking all those drugs and you're like, oh man, we should fucking write a song about it, then you got to do it, I mean, yeah. Apparently too, the lyrics for Mr. Brownstone were like jotted down on the back of a grocery bag. So, how quick were they writing the stuff?
Yeah, like that's really kind of like interesting as well. And I mean, you could also talk about, Out to Get Me, which really kind of focused on Axl Rose's kind of youth and constantly being in trouble in the law down in Indiana. Yeah,
I guess Axl Rose was like a big shithead growing up. But
of course, he's a big shithead now.
Yeah, and to be fair, from what I understand, some of that was just because he was in a abusive household, and that was like his way of kind of acting out, I guess. So I get that, but
yeah. But one thing I feel like that's kind of more iconic than this actual record is the actual record's artwork.
Yeah, there's
and I mean you can really tell like every kind
covers.
Of like someone how like people wear like Ramon shirts but don't not know what the Ramones are or like you'll see just like like people that wear this shirt. It's like, oh really, what's your favorite song?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Yep.
It's like that classic kind of like that torn up kind of like not to be sexist or like like girls will kind of wear it. It's like, oh, Guns N' Roses, woo.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like the album cover that everybody kind of knows is the one with the cross and the skull heads of all the members, but that's not the actual cover. It's like a censored cover. The original cover is like this robot that's trying to rape a woman, and there's like this big other red thing. I guess it's a robot too, like coming down like to stop it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. Yeah, it's like this, this woman on the end. There's like a fence, and then there's like a robot. It's got like a sun head, and then he's in like a trench coat, and then there's this big giant, like I don't even know what to call it. Kind of looks like Carnage, but like it's. Oh, do you ever play Doom?
Yeah.
Like those big kind of like red flying monsters with like the teeth.
Oh yeah, yeah. I guess it does kind of.
Yeah, it kind of looks like that.
Yeah. Huh. But. It's much more of an interesting cover, I think, despite like the the subtext, but even then, like the band kind of stated that the artwork is a quote symbolic social statement with a robot representing the industrial system that's raping and polluting our environment, which I call bullshit on. I think they just wanted.
Bullshit. You're not fucking smart enough to think about that. You just basically wanted to see like just some half naked chick, like in peril.
Yeah, and I mean, that's whatever. But I mean, even funnier than that, man, like their original idea for the cover art was supposed to be a photo of the Space Shuttle Challenger exploding, the one that was on the cover of Time magazine in 1986. But the record company wouldn't do it because they thought it was in bad taste. Which, to be fair, it's kind of in bad taste, especially so soon.
I'm gonna say especially at the time. Yeah, I was gonna say good on the record company for putting a stop to that.
Yeah. So that's how we ended up with the record company that everybody knows now with that cross and their skulls, which Axl also has tattooed on his arm, oddly enough. I was watching this interview and video. We're not gonna play it because it wasn't really that interesting, but he was just talking about like, yeah, I got this tattoo because like no matter what happens with the band, like I just always want to remember this. And I was like, damn, you don't even know. Like the band's gonna implode so hard. So it's good that you always got to fucking look at that thing, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Hopefully, make you be a better person.
Yeah.
Take that fedora off while you're at it.
Oh man. So kind of getting back to the recording stuff. The producer or record company guy, I forget his full name, but his last name's like Zootout or something. He ended up paying the producer Spencer Proffer like $15,000 to record Night Train and Sweet Child O' Mine as kind of like a test for the record, like before it even came out, before they, kind of did anything else. And then they recorded like a few songs to make like an EP, basically, just to kind of see how the band would do. So he says that Proffer didn't produce these songs, his engineer just recorded them, and then this other guy, Cantor, I guess he's like another producer, but he says that Guns N' Roses recorded the two songs in 2 or 3 weeks at a time when they were totally out of control. Like not even Axl was in the best shape, and he was like the cleanest out of everybody in the band.
And that's saying something, yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, like he was messing around with like whatever they were doing. So once he saw that like everybody was like totally just like spun out, the guy just stopped. Nobody showed up on time. They'd throw up or pass out in the studio, but they eventually got those songs done. And to be fair, the band was apparently pretty fucking good at writing songs like really fast. Slash, he claims that Welcome to the Jungle, they wrote that song in just 3 hours.
Yeah, good on him.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's a pretty good amount of time to write a song. And a prolific song at that, I mean, 3 hours isn't terrible.
Yeah, like an actual, like your record's opener as well. So it's got to really, like, really have that kind of hook to really get, really got to hook people in as well. And I really think that song does do that.
Yeah. So a fun little fact before we keep going on about the band. So the song Paradise City. You know that song, right? We were talking about it earlier.
We all know that song, yes.
So the line in the song is, "Take me down to the Paradise City where the grass is green and the girls are pretty." So Slash had other lyrics that he wanted to put in there. God, even reading this is fucking hilarious.
I know, I'm reading this now.
He wanted the original.
He wanted to have the lyrics to "Take me down to the Paradise City where the girls are fat and they've got big titties."
It sounds like a fucking Weird Al parody song right there.
Yeah, like he just did his job for him.
Yeah, he was like, Weird Al, fucking make that song, make it Paradise City with big titties.
Yeah, it's like I'm going to stop him from doing that because I'm going to get to it first. It's like I'm going to be the kid that's going to make fun of himself first before all the other kids can.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah, but that hope, thankfully, that's not how the song goes.
Yeah, I can imagine me liking that song way less. Maybe a little bit more because it's funny. But
Yeah,
again,
you could really go either way with that.
yeah. Oh man. So getting back to the band, and like we kind of touched on this a little bit. These guys were deeply into drugs and alcohol, just like every other like hair metal band around this time, and it kind of, I don't want to say it shows on this record, like you can't really tell, but out of everybody in the band, Axl was like the only one that was like barely sober, and he's surrounded by guys that are fucking strung out on heroin, drugged out on pills, or just fucking drunk. And it added to like a little bit of friction in the band because, as much as Axl like didn't do it to the extent that they did it, it made him not want to be around them when they were all just like completely fucked up.
And you'd think it would be the other way around, that he would be the most fucked up, while like Slash,
right?
like, darling of everybody, would be like the most like clean and sober one there.
Yeah. Slash is like I guess, everybody was pretty bad. I guess I can't really point fingers at one, but Slash's drinking is pretty legendary. I think Steven Adler like almost died a few times from drugs and shit. So, I mean, there's a lesson to be learned here, guys. Just don't do drugs, I guess.
Yeah, don't. Or if you want to do them, just do them like, moderation, quietly.
Yeah. But I mean, despite all this stuff, the band finished pretty much most of their work between March and April. They recorded at Rumbo Studios in Canoga Park, California, Take One Studio in Burbank, and the Record Plant in Los Angeles. And Can-Am Studio in Tarzana. That's a lot of fucking places to record, And while all those sessions were like pretty productive, so to speak, we kind of mentioned this earlier, there were days where Axl would not show up, and then other times when the band's handlers had to like kind of play babysitter basically and put out all these little fires and make sure everybody was trying to fucking just do their job to record this record.
And you'd really think that like this kind of like, it's not very, very kind of a cohesive environment. You'd really think that like that this is just like one of those boy bands that like record executives just gather like 5 kids and just say you're going to be in a band.
Yeah,
the
pretty
songs,
much.
record it. When like you'd expect this kind of behavior from like a band, say like Sabbath or like Crew, when they've already got like a few albums under their record.
Yeah,
you got to start from A, then B, then C. These guys just went straight to fucking F.
Yeah, they totally did, man. They rocketed off so quick, and it was kind of unexpected to say. I mean, at least from my point of view, yeah, I don't think any of them, even watching interviews, I don't think any of them really knew that the album was going to take off the way that it did.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be fair, they didn't have to write any records for almost 3 decades,
Well, they didn't write a record and feel like they fucking took them like 20 years to record a record.
Yeah, pretty much. So before we get to our last 2 little stories that have nothing to do really with the record, I mean, they do a little bit, especially the last story that we're going to end on. What's your opinion on the record? Does it hold up after 30 years?
Look, I think it does, and I think it will continue to hold up for another 30 years. I really just felt it's just got that really kind of hooks. It's catchy, like it's just simple kind of songwriting. There's nothing really too fancy going on with it. But that's fine. That's fine for like the general masses, and it still gets good radio play, and it'll always be up there as like the pantheon of like most iconic records. Not because I think it's the world's most technical thing or the world's greatest thing, but just because like it's just a fun record to like listen to.
Yeah.
And you can really just hear like the influences of that it comes out of into like the rest of kind of metal, just how to like write like a, quite frankly, just a catchy song.
Yeah. And my personal opinion aside, I do have to agree. This is one of those records that no matter what, it's going to be timeless. It's like a cockroach. It's just always going to be there, and there's something to be said for that. If an album can endure the test of time like that, that's a good album, despite what I think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I haven't seen Guns N' Roses live, but I have seen Slash live a couple of times, just at festivals and all that. And they play play songs off this album. Like, it still goes hard.
Nice. Well, that's good to know.
Although, to be fair, Slash is kind of like one of those people, especially about, like, say, 5 years ago. If I was you could go to my wallet, get out $100 note, just start waving it around, I'd hear, like, Slash just, like, descend from the heavens playing, like, the opening of Sweet Child of Mine. He was, like, everywhere.
Yeah, there was something funny. He was talking about, like, that opening riff to Sweet Child of Mine, and like how it was like a joke. It was a complete joke, that riff. He fucking hated it, but then everybody else was like, wait a minute, no, play that again. And it ended up being like, you know, a big hit for them.
Yeah.
So we're going to end on two little, I guess, stories here about the band. I'm saving the best one for last because it's a pretty good one, and it does have to do with something on the record. So this first story here is just kind of, it's a night when they were like recording, basically. So their publicist, I forget her first name. She's like Swedish or something like that. She's the one quoting this story. She says, whenever they were home, they'd get arrested just walking on the street. At one point, Axl's brother, Stuart, called me at like 5 a.m. and said, "Good morning, Arlette." I said, "Really? It's 5 a.m. What's up?" He said, "Nothing really." I said, "It's 5 a.m. Something is up." He said, "Well, Axl would like to talk to you." I said, "Really? And what is he up to?" And he said, "He's in the cell next to me." And so I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Yes, can you arrange for a limo to pick us up in the morning? We're in the drunk tank." And apparently that happened quite a bit. The police picked them up for drunkenness on the street and threw them in the drunk tank, which is funny because Axl did not get drunk to the extent that everybody else did. But, you know, he's Axl Rose, so he was kind of an easy target. So I guess
only he learned.
Yeah, so I guess that shit happened a lot during those days, and it's kind of funny because, you know, the guy that drinks the less is the one that gets picked up